Welcome to All Stars, everybody. I'm Sal. That's Josh. We're talking about everything under the sun, but of course, if you're not familiar, you should be by now. You got to be reading Superman twice a month. It's an amazing series. You got to pick up his copy of Rogues. I brought mine to New York Comic Con to get signed, and it did.
That's right. That was super weird that I signed your copy of the Rogues.
How is that weird? You're like,
I don't know. It's always when I know the person. I guess when
fair.
I'm like friends with the person, and I say that there's a lot of people that come through the line that I'm friends with and I get along with and stuff.
Exactly.
But I also feel like there's that. I feel like once I am texting with you about like silly stuff, I feel like we've hit another level.
That's true, but I am
if
also
we're texting jokes to each other. I feel
Yeah.
like we've hit like another level of friendship. That
Well,
I'm like, I'm not signing your book. What are you talking
do
about?
I need to sign your book? Yeah.
I-
But have I ever told the story about when it was the first New York Comic Con? This is all we're talking about, New York Comic Con. The first New York Comic Con, my wife and an old friend of mine are walking the floor, and we are neck deep in Venture Brothers. We love Venture Brothers so much. It's an amazing show.
Yeah.
And my wife brought me into it. She's the one who's like, this show is amazing. This is hilarious. I'm the one who's like, Johnny Quest, no thanks. And then I watched it. I'm like, oh. But we're walking the floor, and I go, is that Doc Hammer and Jackson Public like right over there at the Wizard booth? And they're just, and it's great because Doc Hammer is like, Jackson Public is like in his element, and he's like looking at comic books and he's reading through Wizard magazines, and Doc Hammer's like dragged along like he's somebody's like date, and he's just like, oh my god. So my wife is like, don't talk to them. I don't want you to embarrass me in front of them. And I'm like, all right. So I immediately walk over to them and I go, hey, listen, I love your show, but my wife is such a big fan, and Doc, she loves your art, and she follows you on what is still known today as DeviantArt, which is a art website.
You were dating this story in so many ways.
I know, so many ways, right?
So funny.
So
you're like, I got Wizard,
I
got
Venture Brothers,
Venture Brothers. Because if you just told me Venture Brothers, this could have been like a year ago.
Right,
but
exactly.
Once you brought in Wizard, I was like, okay, I know what this is.
2006, yeah. So we're talking about that, and so Tiffany comes over, and awkwardly, and Doc immediately chats her up, and they start talking about art because he's a big fan of paint, and my wife is a big art major, and so like they're just going on, and so that now they can't go anywhere, and so now Jackson Public is stuck with me, and he is like, so do you like read comics or whatever? And I'm like, yeah. And my friend next to me goes, so is Jackson Public like a fake name, or is that like real? And he's like, it's my name, dude. And then like we just look at each other for a little bit, and we ended up actually talking about something else. By the way, Jackson Public is a pseudonym, so whatever. But anyway, so it's this horribly uncomfortable situation, but made nice because like Hammer and my wife are like really hitting off, which sounds like it's going to turn into something else, but it doesn't. They end up having this really genuine connection, and then we're all talking for a minute, and then like, well, anyway, there was a big announcement like, hey, the floor is going to close, we got to go. And they're like, all right, well, that was a lot of fun, because I went over there to get just an autograph. I had a comic book board and like a marker, and I had it the whole time. I just awkwardly like holding it, but I'm trying not to bring it into conversation, because I'm like, oh no, now we're having like real human interactions. I can't make it weird.
Yeah.
So they're like, all right, well, that was fun. I guess we should go. And then I just go. And so.
Oh, it's right there. Yeah, it's awesome. Best story. Best story. Yeah.
They signed it. Jackson drew a little monarch, and I got a picture with the both of them. But like, they did not. The humor was not lost on them too. Like when I like awkwardly handed them a thing, I'm like, don't forget, I'm a nerd at a Comic-Con, and you're a comic book creator.
And you're gonna sign this comic book backing board.
That's me. Like I saw so many amazing people that I know personally whose phone numbers I have, which is the weirdest thing in the world. And by so many, I mean I think it's two. I think it's you, and I think it's like Chip. But like, I saw Chip, and he was like, what are you doing out here? And I was like, oh, I was gonna get in your line, but I don't want to wait an hour again, like, because I already did that last week. And he's like, what are you gonna get signed? And I'm like, public domain. And he's like, give it to me. Just give it to me. And
well, also the funny thing was that you and I had breakfast on Saturday.
We had breakfast.
To wait in line.
But I'm not gonna bring. That would be
weirder. What's weirder, waiting in the line or bringing it to our breakfast?
I think it's weird bringing it to breakfast. I think that taints the breakfast. I think breakfast is just you and me having breakfast. Keep it cool.
Yeah, that's true.
Line is
Okay.
where that's supposed to happen, you know? It'd
Yeah,
be
all
weird if I
right, that's
brought you a
fine.
burrito in line. It'd be weird if I brought the comic book to breakfast. I think
Listen, I would have been fine with both.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bring me a burrito. That would be totally fine.
Oh, yeah,
I
I
don't
mean-
eat red meat, so preferably a chicken or a veggie
no
burrito.
But
It
yeah,
makes me
man,
very limited. But yeah, that is
no red
cool.
meat. Oh man, oh no.
Oh, listen, no, the red meat thing, it kills me because originally it was like for health reasons, but then I was like, you know, it was for health reasons at first, but I could cheat on every once in a while, you know, because
Okay.
it wasn't like, you know, it was mostly for like cholesterol, you know, all the fun
Absolutely.
stuff with your heart when you get older.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll cut out red meat, I can do that, but I would cheat on it, you know. I'd be like, I'd have a hamburger once, especially when I was at conventions. I was like, that's the rule. If I'm at a convention, well,
yeah. All bets are off. You're in the Wild West, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of stuff. It'll be totally fine. And then a friend of mine, I would have migraines really bad, just like awful migraines. And so a friend of mine was like, you should keep a food journal. And he was like, I used to get migraines in college really bad. And then he figured out it was something he was eating. It was shellfish. Anything with shellfish would give him migraines. So that was the pattern. So he's like, keep a food journal. So I kept the food journal for like a year. And then Nick Darrington came over here for pizza to the house. Name dropping. He came here to the house, had pizza, and hung out in my office with me for a while. And we ate pepperoni pizza with my wife and my kid at the time. It was a long time ago. There was one. Now there's two.
Only one. Yeah.
Yeah. That also dates my life sometimes. I'm like, when I realized there was a time where there was one, and now there's a time where there's two. But the next day, it was a Monday. I was like laid out. It was one of the worst migraines I ever had. And I was like, oh, no. I go back through, I look through it, and I'm like, it's got to be red meat. And so I went and I Googled, you know, does red meat cause migraines? And they're like, yes. And then number one is pepperoni. And I was like, you're kidding me, because that was one of my cheats.
Pepperoni's red meat? I had no idea. I just thought it was.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's processed.
Well, it's many things.
It's many things, but technically it's processed meat, you know.
Yeah.
Back when I went to Vegas in the summer, when I went to Vegas for that week, we were at this like really, really fancy sushi place. It was like one of the most like fancy restaurants I've ever been to, and I'll tell you that story later. But it was amazing. It was insanely expensive. I was kind of surprised when the check came. And so at one point he's like, I know you don't eat red meat, because it was one of those where like they craft the meal for you, you know.
Yes,
they ask you a bunch of questions beforehand. He's like, I know you don't like red meat, but we have this one thing, and it's Wagyu beef. It's like the best Wagyu beef, this whole thing. Would you be willing to try that? And I was like, yes, I'll try it. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Who knows what happens?
Right,
tomorrow.
But that's tomorrow.
It's always like the next day. It's like you know, rolling the dice.
Yeah.
The next day. So I had it, and it was delicious. It was delicious, and I had no headache the next day. And I was like, oh, so you're basically telling me that my brain is expensive. It's basically just like, we're only going to take the really fancy, expensive stuff.
Exactly.
But,
that's good.
Well, sticking with New York Comic Con. Yeah, New York Comic Con this year was wild, dude. I feel like every minute of my day was spoken for. It was like
Easily.
From 8 a.m. until whenever we called it quits in the night. I remember at one point, and also what's rough is that my brain is still operating on West Coast time, and we're on the East Coast. And so like, so even when you and I are having breakfast, when you and I are meeting, my brain is like, what are you doing? It's 5 a.m. Like, what is happening right now? At one point, James Sneed and I were walking the street together on Friday night, and we're walking on the street, and we're just bullshitting. We're talking, and James is like, man, it's late. And I was like, what are you talking about, dude? It's not even midnight. No.
Like, no, it's 3.
It was 2:47 in the morning. And I was like, oh my God. And then he and I were talking till like 3:30. And then I was like, dude, I gotta go.
I gotta get up in 5 hours.
Well, this is the night before I saw you. So I was like, I gotta get to the room. I'll see you later. Bye.
Yeah.
But that was actually one of the more fun things about this, because San Diego, I think I had like work to do during the show. Last year's New York, I had so much work to do that every day I was leaving the show and I was going to my room to write. And then I left Saturday afternoon. Like, we did the Superman panel where we announced Superman. And I literally left the panel, went outside, caught an Uber, went to the airport, and flew home. Like, it was like a fluid motion.
Yeah.
And so this year I was like, okay, I'm not leaving until Sunday morning. I have no work to do at night. Technically, there's always work to be done. I'm doing way too much. So there's always something to be done. But it was in a position where it was like, oh, I'm not gonna get any work in my room. So actually, each night I was able to go out and do stuff. So it's like each night I was able to go do something and like meet with artists and writers and editors, and that was one of the best highlights of it. Was just doing that, and then we announced the House of Brainiac like Superman action crossover we're gonna do next year for 3 months. That's gonna be really fun. Rafa Sandoval is drawing all of it, and it is insane.
Awesome.
There's a part where I said this on the panel where it's like there's a part where a bunch of Lobos come, they rain down on Metropolis from above, like they're just they can't fly, so they're literally just jumping out of spaceships and they're landing in Metropolis.
Yeah.
And I remember writing the script and giving it to Rafa and just being like, there are different ways to do this page, right? And I'm like, there's a way to do this. You can kind of cheat it a little bit, like still make it big and impressive, but kind of cheat it a little bit. And Rafa was like, nah, I ain't doing that. And so he drew this like bonkers thing. It's like it's so crazy detailed. It's insane. And he dude, it's bonkers. We were at dinner one night and we were talking about it, and I basically was apologizing to him. But at the same time, I was like, Rafa, I gave you an out. There was like an easy version of this, and you had to do the hard way.
Yeah.
And then he went and I'm gonna text it to you right now.
Oh, sweet.
Dan Mora was sitting there, and then Dan Mora looked at it, and Dan Mora was like, you're a crazy person. Like, why would you do this to yourself?
Yeah.
But yeah, like we announced that, and that was really, really fun. It's funny, the night before we were talking about the whole we're doing a Superman Western story.
Okay.
And we had been planning this from the beginning. It was this whole thing. And DC, for some reason, they were like, oh, we're not going to show that on the panel. They had like decided the morning of. And then I showed them the art, and they were like, oh, maybe we should show this on the
Cue
panel.
It up. Yeah.
And so we ended up doing it last, which was really funny. It was supposed to be early, but I was like, yo, I think we're going to be excited about Superman in a Western. I just feel it. Like, I can feel this.
Yeah.
And Jamal did this amazing cover. And so then we did it last. And I had this whole like, so what was funny is I didn't know we were going to do it. They actually texted me while I was on the panel. So I'm in the panel, we're talking, and I get a text with like, hey, we're showing the Western cover last. And I was like, oh, okay. So then we get to the end, and I'm like, oh, with Superman, we've had this whole plan of like, we want to show all the different genres. We want to put Superman in all the different genres. So we're like, oh, horror, action, romance. And then I was like, and so we're going to do Western. And we put the cover up, and dude, that audience lost its goddamn mind. And it was nice. It was a nice moment of like, I did it.
Yeah.
Everybody's happy I was right.
Right. And it's nice to get that validation. Like, you're putting yourself out there and you're making these choices, and it's cool to you. And so that's going to be really satisfying creatively. But you also got to convince like people who make decisions that it's going to be awesome to other people besides yourself. Cause like, obviously you're going to be excited, but what about, everybody who's
that's
watching?
one of the hardest parts of this job sometimes. You should look, I just sent it to you.
I'm looking at it right now. Oh my God, no.
It's bonkers, right?
Why would he choose that angle? There's no...
I don't know.
That's awesome.
It's like, it's beautiful, and it's insane, and it's awesome, but at the same time, you're just like, Rafa, what are you doing to yourself?
Why did you do this? With this? Yeah, this is awesome. Folks, when you get this, what issue will this be, do you think?
It's Action 1064.
Action 1064.
It's the first part of the House of Brainiac crossover.
Folks, you're going to have to like make sure to spend an extra couple of minutes looking at this page, because it's sick. I can't put it in the episode. I just have to look.
You can't
look at me looking at it.
But we can talk about it.
Yeah.
It's insane, right? Yeah. That is a nuttiness. But that is one of the hardest parts of the job, is that like, and I think this is the pit that some creators fall into and executives have fallen into. And I think it's one of the constant conflicts, is that like, just because I love it doesn't mean anybody else does.
Yeah.
I talk about Bloodlines a lot. I love Bloodlines when I was a kid. There are people that's like a joke to them. They really hate it, or they don't like it, or whatever. And so I have to keep in mind there are characters that I love and I think are a big deal. That's been one of the things about like every time we end an issue and like we do a big reveal or whatever of a new character or a character returning.
Yeah.
I have to put in mind like, now if I got to this page, I might be super excited. I might be like,
to think about who's going to the comic shops and buying now.
Exactly. It might be like, one is, who is this?
Yeah.
Like one of them, I don't think I'm talking out of turn with this, because I think, it's one of my favorite events and it really worked, but it was definitely a moment was when there was a guy who would come to the comic book store I worked at in the early, like, mid 2000s, and he would come in. I might have told you the story before, but he would come in every week. He was like a Wednesday warrior, but he was a Marvel person.
Okay.
And when the hype around countdowns to Infinite Crisis, so the original one.
Okay,
one,
all right,
right, the Blue Beetle one, not the Countdown to Final Crisis, Countdown to Infinite Crisis.
Okay.
Or sorry, yeah, not Final Crisis, Infinite Crisis. There was a special where Blue Beetle died.
Yes,
that
was a good one.
That
Yeah.
was so much, and it was $1. Like, people forget it was $1 for like an 80-page book,
right?
You know, and that book, it's a really good comic book. And the hype around was so strong that we were just like hand slinked every single person that came in. And so he was like, all right, I'm in. I'm doing it. And so he read it. He was like, I loved it. I understood what was going on. It was emotional. He's like, I'm in. I'm on everything. And so he bought everything. He bought all the minis leading into Infinite Crisis.
That's
he
awesome.
Bought everything, right?
Yeah.
He was asking us questions about stuff, like all of it. And so when Infinite Crisis #1 came out, I sat there and I read it that morning, and I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And I obviously love events at DC, and I read them, and I know probably too much about them. I have like maybe a couple blind spots here or there, but I was like, I love events. So when I got to that ending, I was like, yes. He came in, he bought the comic, and he left the comic store. And then he came back in like 2 or 3 hours later, and he walks in and he opens the last page. He's like, who is this? Who is this? And I was like, oh, that's Superman. That's Lois Lane. That's Alexander Luthor. And that's Superboy Prime. And I had to like explain the whole thing to him. And, and that's not a knock on that comic, because I still think that's one of the best events DC's ever done. It's one of the most coordinated, I'm jealous sometimes of how much that event worked.
Coalesced. Yeah.
Yeah, it really worked, It
does.
And when you go back and you look at that moment, you're just like, oh yeah, this was the most hype I think DC's had in my outside of the 90s, like when you're talking about like Death of Superman, Nightfall, which that stuff was crazy.
Absolutely.
But I think in that period of time, it was like that was going on, and we also had like all the stuff that was going on with Avengers at the same time. Like Civil War was happening. I think Civil War had already happened at that point.
Right.
It was just that moment, like those things were just working really well.
But
so that's something I have to keep in mind a lot when I'm working on this stuff, of like, I have to make sure what I think, is exciting might not be exciting for everybody else. You know, and you should always follow your heart, but at the same time, you're trying to appeal to a wider audience. And that's something you and I talked about a bit, where it's like, I think one of the things I've kind of come to this conclusion of is that like there is no such, you can't judge good or bad with comics anymore. It just doesn't connect. Does it engage and connect with a wide enough audience that's buying it?
100%.
You look at, it's funny, this last weekend, I haven't seen it, but Five Nights at Freddy's came out.
Yes.
And last week, it's getting just trashed. Just
hammered.
Trashed. And I saw this one review, and it was like, only fans of this are going to like this.
Who the hell's it made for? I mean, like, it is a movie, so it's like it costs like hundreds of millions of dollars, but like, what's the problem? Yeah. No, and then of course you see the disproportionate scores. Like the critics are all like, what even is this? And then the audience is like, finally. Yeah, and the audience is like, going to the theater, and they obviously made a lot of money this last weekend. And I think that's the stuff that I try to like. It's one of the more, I don't want to use the word mature, but it is one of the most difficult parts of being a creator, is that moment where you have to say, I'm taking a step back. And like, so you have to separate yourself out. And I actually don't think, Dan had this sign. I don't think he had it anymore. He used to have it. I don't think he had it when they made the move to Burbank. Mm-hmm. But he had a sign that basically, I don't remember the exact wording, but it basically said you have to kind of leave the fan at the door. You have to come in as a professional, leave the fan at the door. And at the time, I was always like, I don't know if I agree with that or not, because I'm such a fan of these characters and a fan of this stuff. Well, you wouldn't do it if you didn't love it, but yeah.
You start recognizing some of the challenges of like, are you too precious about it? Are you too, are you
too married to, you have to, I can imagine being like, I've built to this moment in my fans' heart for like 20 years, and I've only been working as a professional for like 3 or 4. And it's like the hype that you've built for yourself to do something or to execute some moment that you've been waiting to see in a comic book for 20 years.
Yeah.
It doesn't translate necessarily. You have to be like, diplomatic about it. You have to.
No, yeah, you might, like, It's an interesting challenge because I do think with being a fan comes a certain level of respect for those characters and understanding you have to like take care of them. But
Right.
if you're too much of a fan, that means you're unwilling to put them into real danger. And that
Right.
means you're unwilling to create real stakes and real drama. And you have to recognize that you have to tell a story over a year, potentially years, that means putting your character through hell. And that's real hard.
Yeah.
It's real hard. And what's sad is that what history has shown us consistently is that if you put them through hell, it equals sales.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's difficult. And I understand that. Like there are times, where we've put some of the characters into some difficult situations.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we get yelled at, but then his sales are insane. And you're like, well, okay.
Right. Like, who do I listen to at that point? We were talking about the fact that, there's so many people who have a very strong opinion about a married Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And how the current run of Spider-Man is Marvel's top performer every single
sells every month. Yep.
Week.
It's
except
arguably
for
the highest selling comic in comics right now.
Exactly. Although I will say, I'm proud to say, Predator versus Wolverine was the #1 book at Marvel for the first issue.
Yes, but that's still fan servicey stuff. Like that's still like, but
that's all I want. I
that's all
want
you
like
want sometimes. Well,
Predator versus Wolverine. It better be just Predator versus Wolverine for 4 issues.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You want to see them fight. I think this is the thing you have to like. There is a balance. I was talking about this with through Skybound. There's like an upcoming scene. I probably shouldn't talk about this. There's just stuff coming that we're like, you have to look at wrestling rules.
Yes.
Right. Where it's like you got to make sure you put people over. You're not burying them.
Mm-hmm.
People can still lose and not get buried.
Yeah.
You have to like you got to get some drama.
That was make it... for 30 years. It was Spider-Man. I mean, for 50 years, it was Spider-Man. That's Spider-Man to a T. It's like he can lose, but he doesn't have to be like dragged through the mud.
Well, that's the rule, though, right? The rule is, and Tom Brevoort said this in the back of the Brand New Day hardcover. He talks about this, where he says he's like the rule is, and I'm not sure if we call this a rule. Maybe I'm curious if he would call it a rule, but this is sort of the thing they approach it sometimes. Is that like Spider-Man wins, Peter Parker loses.
Yeah.
Peter Parker wins, Spider-Man loses, and like that's sort of the dynamic where it's like he's constantly making some kind of sacrifice.
Yes.
He's like, well, I'm gonna save the world, but I'm gonna piss off Mary Jane.
Exactly.
All right, well, I'm going to save Mary Jane, but like something bad might happen over here. And so much of that is like the great power, comes great responsibility stuff. And it's like he's constantly making sacrifices because of his guilt and because he genuinely wants to help people.
Yeah.
But that means you're putting him through hell constantly. And I think that's true of all of the characters. Like,
well, Daredevil certainly,
is the reason why soap operas are on every day and they go on forever and wacky stuff happens and characters weird things happen to them. Every once in a while, though, it is interesting, right? Because you'll have like in soap operas where like two characters get married in a soap opera, all of a sudden the ratings are crazy. Yeah. So it's like this weird balance of like, trying to find those things, and sometimes giving them the happy thing isn't always. I don't know. It can be a little unpredictable at times, but it all depends upon I think the balance. And then as a company, you kind of have to walk that balance.
Yeah.
Between different books, because you don't want to be the challenges. You don't want them to get burnt out. Like this is the thing about wrestling, right? So with wrestling rules, there's a thing they talk about where it's like you can't be such a heel that people turn off.
Exactly.
Right. You have to kind of walk that line a little bit. But yeah, so we announced the Western stuff for Superman. We announced the House of Brainiac stuff, which is really exciting. It's just for 3 months. We're just doing the crossover for 3 months, but it's really like a buildup of all these story pieces from Superman action over the last year, involving Brainiac and the Lobos, the Bottle City of Lobos that he's had, and we
talked a little bit about the Bottle City of Lobo, I think off mic, and I was like, what a solid idea. And I knew, and once it came out, I looked online, I had to see the scuttlebutt, and like initially the response was like, because there are certain subreddits that are very like something new comes out and they're like, well, here's another, crap fest. Here's another mistake.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
With Bottle City Lobo, like the first reactions were things like, yeah, I guess that's kind of an awesome idea. Like, this begrudging, like, I kind of love it. I kind of actually love it. And I'm like, yeah, you do. You love the idea.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That there is that impulse that people have of like they always hate stuff immediately. That's just part of the game. That just,
Yeah.
It's honestly, it's sometimes kind of fun. I'm not as like hardcore about it as like Daniel can be with Transformer stuff, where Daniel literally at the panel was like, he was like, bring it, bring your unhappiness. I drink your tears. I was like, oh,
dude,
he's really going heel. This is
well,
awesome.
he's very like, who's the
yeah, no, he really was, dude. He's so funny. But with each character in this Lobo or in the Super mythology, not the Lobo mythology, but the Super mythology. Don't get me wrong, I have a lot of thoughts on Lobo, but when it comes to the mythology of Superman, I'm just trying to take each character and do something new with them. Like, just something new. Just move them a little bit. Not crazy, just move them a little bit, because I don't want to look backwards. On a lot of my books, I've looked backwards a lot. And it's like even with like Green Arrow is heavy in looking backwards. So with the books, you know, it's funny, like with Batman and Robin this morning, I was working on something, an artist asked for a ref for something, and I was like, okay, when did this, I'm referencing something from 2 years ago. Okay, that's not so bad. Like that's still in like, I feel like that's a good
still
window.
in the rear view. Like it's still not like, it's not all the
way
way
but then there are times where I'm like doing research on books that are like 20 years old to make a scene work. And don't get me wrong, I will always do that. It's who I am as a writer. Yes. But I do recognize that was part of Superman, where it's like, I gotta just move it like forward. It has to be constantly forward, not always looking backwards. And so with each of these characters, it was like, okay, what's that thing? Right. And with Lobo, I went on this whole path about how, you know, aside from Crush, and you know, his like teacher was alive at one point and he killed her and stuff. But I was like, he's the last son of his world. And I was really thinking about that's really interesting. He's the last son, his world was destroyed. And then I was like, wait a minute. His world was destroyed? Okay, hold on a second. That's when I was like, I know that his world wasn't technically destroyed, but you know, like, you know, all the stuff that Lobo killed everybody. Yeah. And I was like, that's really interesting. You know, it's like, I could see a thing where Brainiac went there and got a city, but it was a city with no knowledge, basically. Like that's his thing. He's like,
he's like, oh well, you're not gonna win them all. Like I'm not gonna learn anything from all these fucking places. You know?
But it was a city of like violence, and I think he was curious about that piece of it. Well, we do explore this in the event of like how this happened and why it happened, right? And how this whole time Brainiac has had a bottle city of Zarnia, and he's just now using it. Like he's learning and he's changing tactics, and we get into that. Like there's a scene early on in the event where Superman, I mean, I shouldn't even call it an event, it's a crossover. Yeah. But in the crossover where he says, Superman is like, this is all so unlike Brainiac, and Brainiac is like, indeed, you know, like, he's changing tactics and stuff. But yeah, it's been working on that book is really fun, and I do feel like that is, you know, that'll be the 1 year mark, which also is weird. I feel like I've been working on Superman for years at this point, but it'll be the 1 year mark, and then we'll move into new stories after that. That'll be really fun to do with the book. But that's our, you know, that's the end of the first year, is that crossover story that focuses on Superman, Brainiac, Lobo, and it has, you know, has Supergirl, and it has Khan in it. It has everybody. Like it's there'll be some surprising moments, I think, in it. I'm really excited about telling it. So last time I was on here, we talked about I asked a question, and I said to people watching, I was like, okay, if I were to ever do a Marvel book, what would you want me to do? Yes. And we put it into the comments, said we'll ask, and we do that again with the end of this one. We'll ask a question. But I'm gonna read them. Yeah. And we're gonna evaluate them. We're gonna evaluate that reaction. I'm doing them in order of like likes. No. I'm doing the order of time. Like newest to oldest. Okay, cool. We can do likes if you want. Oh no, it's I'm mostly gonna look at the ones that are about me. Yes. Not the ones that are just about other stuff. I did. Right, I should throw. I threw this to the community tab as well, so I have a couple of comments there too. Okay, yeah, we can look at that too. Yeah, well, let's go through these and then we'll. This one is directly just like, who should Joshua Williamson write at? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, we'll look at that one too. I'm gonna look at the comments that were in the video first here. This person says it's good to know that Joshua Williamson not only reads his own books from time to time, he also reads other people's stuff. Before writing his Flash Runner. Yeah, I read everything. Yeah, right. Isn't that nice? There's a scene coming up in. I'm reading a lot of comics in general, but I read a lot of DC books to keep things connected in line. There's a scene of a Green Arrow coming up, where I turned it in and then I was like, oh, this is gonna be one of those issues that has to get read by everybody. And I was like, oh, should I notify them? And so I was talking to another editor and I was like, hey, I want you to know there's a scene in this issue that connects to XYZ. And they were like, oh, no. We actually all read it already. And we're like, thank you for doing that. Like, thank you for including all this stuff and making it so it actually reflected what was happening in the books.
Cool.
Used to love Sigma 6. Me too. I had toys from that cartoon. I didn't watch a lot of it, but I had toys from it.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Dan Mora on a Thundercats book. That's not a Marvel book.
That's not a Marvel book.
It's a Dynamite comic right now.
Yeah, I would read that book, though. No.
What's that?
I would read that book. That'd be one good.
That'd be really funny.
Fun book.
Declan actually is doing a book on that right now at Dynamite. I think that's right.
Oh.
That's announced. I'm not saying anything.
Okay, good. I was like, oh.
I'll throw you one better though. I would, for a really long time, and I actually wrote a pitch for it. I really wanted to write Silverhawks. So technically the same universe.
Yes, technically, yeah.
And I think that the company that does the Cell, I think is what they're called. They make toys and stuff. They have the rights for it. I think.
Yes. Yeah. I think you're right.
I never pulled the trigger on the Super 7 toys because they're so expensive.
Yeah.
This person said, Josh is the first writer to get me to read Superman on the reg. Awesome.
See how it works. Yeah.
Let's see. I'm just burning through these. Yes, I love 90s comics. My dear Cobra Commander. Yeah, I probably said that because I do love him. I love Tom Riley's art in the Thing miniseries. Yeah, it was dope. It was real good. Actually, It was funny. I'm not sure if I said this last time when Tom and I, did I tell you this? When Tom and I were talking on the phone before he did that mini, and he was like, I got offered a Thing miniseries. I'm going to go do that. I was like, oh, that's cool. I love John Carpenter. Like, I had
you didn't think about
clicked. He was talking about Fantastic Four until later.
That's amazing.
And here we go. An FF book by Josh would be so sweet, or be sweet. Yes. So that was what you said.
That's what I said. I was like,
that was what
Josh
you said. I do have a pitch for them in my head. I have an idea for them in my head.
It's an idea. It hasn't really fleshed out yet. But
yeah. And this one I love is I can totally see Josh Williamson doing a Bloodlines 2 at DC in the future. Listen, if you ever see me doing Bloodlines 2, that means I'm leaving.
Because it's the last thing. It's your mic drop.
That's like, I did it. I'm done. I'm out.
Is there any way, like, to whom must we talk to at least get the omnibus? Because
listen, I've tried.
I've been pushing this forever. I'm like, Eclipso, The Darkness Unleashed, Armageddon 2001, and Bloodlines. Like,
I ask and I don't.
Like,
well, we have that, but all those annuals that they did were
like, that's what I'm saying, man.
Here's Elseworld annuals.
Oh,
you know, here's annuals that are just all the Western pulp ones, like the Western ones they did the pulp ones. Like, I would love to do all of that. I wish.
You know how hard it is to read Bloodlines today, like especially if you use the app. You gotta. There's no rhyme or reason.
Oh no, dude, it's all over the place, and they're not all on there. They're not all on there.
That's right.
Yeah,
so I have them all.
Another Fantastic Four. Yeah, I have it. Iron Man. I have an idea for Iron Man.
Oh, I'd read it.
I have like a whole thing on Iron Man in my head. Nice. Actually, it's in a notebook too. I have like a whole Iron Man idea.
You're like ready, yeah.
Oh, I have like a whole, like I know how it opens and everything. That's what my brain thinks. I think of first issues. It drives my editors crazy sometimes because they're like, "Can you write an outline?" I'm like, I have to write the first issue first.
They're like,
I can't do them at the same time because as you're writing the first issue, you start seeing the pieces that you need, and then you do the outline, and then you go back and make changes to the first issue. But it starts making you realize like what pieces need to go where, and really where your head is with it. You know, Amazing Spider-Man. I have an idea for Amazing Spider-Man. I've thought about this a lot. West Coast Avengers. West Coast Avengers is a blind spot for me. Yeah, it's one of my Marvel blind spots. I've read a lot of it, and I actually read it in the later issues more so, the early ones. But that one is always a blind spot to me. Superman is the best book out right now, and Josh's totally killing it. I agree.
Hey, thank you. Goes on the cover.
I love how everybody is like, you are the perfect interviewer. You are. You should do like a book or something. I think you could totally do like a what do you call it? A spoken word.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, I was thinking about doing that. I actually, it's funny. I was going through old like interviews, and I realized there were like 20 of us. Like there were more. I was like, Josh and I before the show, we had done like. I was like, we did like 4 or 5 episodes. There were like 13. I was like, what?
We talked a lot.
Oh my god.
That's why I was like, this will be easy. This will be easy.
And it is, yeah. No, but it was. Yeah.
This is really funny. I love this one. It was like I personally, he very came back to Marvel. I would love to see him write Spider-Man 2099. And then there's a comment, and they're like, as long as he either reads what Steve Orlando has been doing with Miguel, or he doesn't interfere with his yearly July weekly miniseries, I would love that. Steve Orlando has so much love for the entire 2099 imprint that I have a hard time seeing what else top what he's done in 2 years in a row. Listen, I love Steve, and I am incredibly jealous that he does that stuff every year. So I do read it. He and I texted about it. He knows we both have a shared love of 2099 stuff, and I will admit, I think his like overall love of it might be deeper than mine. I actually haven't asked him this. I'm like, but did you read all of it? Because once it got to the point, I'm like, did you read when it became Legion of Superheroes? Did you read when Miguel Hammer became Thor? Like, like that stuff I'm curious about. All that stuff got erased, like that stuff never happened.
Yeah.
I think that Exiles as a book was really good, and then once they added Miguel to it, just for me, it was like, yes, hell yeah, like
yes.
I was like, yes, this is the smartest thing they could do, is to grab.
Put a Spider-Man on the book, especially that one. Yeah, no, that's such a great idea.
Let's see here. I'm trying to find more.
I saw one that was I want Josh as Spider-Man 2099. His love for the character is needed for that character. Like Dan Slott with Peter Parker, just maybe don't overstay the tenure.
Oh, I don't think I would ever stay on any book that long. I was actually thinking about this the other day about how like I was on the Flash for so long, and it's funny, like I don't really have I've done a lot of books at DC. I don't have really long runs on anything other than that because I bounce around a lot. The reason why Flash worked in that moment was because it was double ship. And I was kind of like built for double ship, I think. But that was like my full-time job for like 5 years.
Yeah.
And so it was hard to bounce around other projects. Me doing Spider-Man was really fun. Spider-Man is my favorite Marvel character, which you and I have talked about.
Yeah.
Daredevil is tough. I would love to see Josh make the Daredevil. Listen, after Chip, I don't know. I mean, I read Saladin's first issue. I don't think the second issue's come out yet. I read Saladin's first issue, and I really like the pitch for it. I like I'm gonna get into spoilers here. I like the idea of Daredevil as an exorcist. I'm like, all right, good job, good idea. But that's also what's kind of frustrating, because you're like, you look at what Chip did, and Chip's run is up there, right? It's like one of the definitive runs, and you look at what Mark Waid did, and it's just like, oh my god, Brubaker, Bendis, like you have all of these amazing runs for it.
Yeah.
Coming off a Chip, like for Saladin, it must have been crazy pressure. I don't know Saladin at all. We've never met before, but I'm like, it must be crazy pressure. And then for Saladin to come in and be like, he's an exorcist, I'm like, I'm here.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
I'm here. But yeah, I would love to write Daredevil. But that's one thing that's funny. So here's the thing. I think about this sometimes when it comes to characters you love, and this goes back to the thing that you were talking about before. Just because you love a character doesn't mean you should write it.
Yes.
You might be too close. You might just not have the idea for it, And so I think about that sometimes, where I'm like, oh, I love this character a lot. And it's rough when you know somebody really loves a character, and then you read it and you're like, do you? Do you though?
Right.
And so for me, there are characters that I love that I just don't know if I'm the person to write them. Let me see here. Looking at the Marvel ones.
Yeah.
There's New Mutants is a blind spot for me. New Mutants is a huge blind spot. I've talked to friends about this. Like, you should read it. X-Men is a weird one. So X-Men is a book I never want to write. Like, I have no interest in writing the X-Men, other than we talked before, Wolverine or Deadpool. But it's like, outside of that, my brain doesn't go that direction.
No.
And New Mutants, I think, would be interesting, because I really love Generation X. But here's the thing. So I'm a Generation X person.
There you go.
So I started reading New Mutants when Cable showed up. So it's like, so if you're like a hardcore New Mutants person, I might be your worst nightmare. You might
exactly.
Be like, no.
Right? Shatterstar is going to have an arc. It's going to be big. Like,
it's not going to be X-Force. Like, because I was really into X-Force. I was in like that whole time period and that's probably my age, possibly. Let's see here. FF again. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. And I actually like what Ryan North is doing right now.
Yeah.
I like the done in one kind of things, and he's also building into a bigger story. I'm a little behind though. I'm behind by like maybe 2 or 3 months, maybe a month.
Definitely.
Heroes for Hire would be interesting, and She-Hulk. She-Hulk's also kind of a blind spot for me. I've read some
Mm.
She-Hulk stuff, and I've read more of the more recent, but like the John Byrne era was one that I never really got into, and I think that's one of the ones people really look at as being like the best.
Yeah.
Heroes for Hire is a book I tried to write. I tried to pitch Heroes for Hire a couple times. You know, and part of it is because I do like, and I think it's what's funny, if I ever went over there, I probably would do way more. And Fantastic Four would be like the outlier.
Right.
But it's like street level. And actually that's something, you know, outside of Superman, once I did Dark Crisis, I was like,
all bets are off. You can...
Yeah. Well, no, I'm out. Like, I'm not doing any more cosmic
Oh,
stuff.
no more cosmic stuff.
I did it. Having Green Arrow run around time and space, I was like, all right, cool. We did it. Now,
right. Back in the streets.
I do kind of want to do a few more grounded stories for a while. Who knows? Like, it's funny. Like, Silver Surfer is a character I've always been drawn to, and I find really fascinating. I just don't know. It's weird. I'm drawn to that character, but I don't have it in here. You know, when Donnie and Trad did Silver Surfer Black, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I actually got that toy because I really liked that book a lot. I have it's over here somewhere. I have that giant version of it they did.
Me too,
really
yeah. No, I had the same reaction. I never loved Silver Surfer, but I never really had an issue with him. It was just kind of like, I was like, this is the Stan book where he waxes poetic. Okay. And then going back and rereading it, I'm like, oh, I kind of like, we covered the one where it was essentially all drawn. It was written by John Buscema, but it was all drawn by him as well. And then Stan came in and filled in. You know, it was Marvel style. Yeah, and it's just like, it's really interesting, and you could feel this kind of like, I don't know. I like it, but he's a little too impenetrable. You know, like
I really liked it in that kind of in the post Infinity Gauntlet, like Infinity Watch, Infinity Crusade with Ron Lim and stuff. I was really into that era. I think that was the moment, and I loved Annihilation. Like Annihilation is just an underrated, amazing event. Like every issue of it, that's an event that I was so into. Yeah. And I've actually reread it a few times, and I'm like, oh man, this one works really well. All these character pieces work really well. Yep. So that's another moment in like the Silver Surfer kind of era that I did like. But Silver Surfer is interesting. I don't know. There's something about him that I'm like always drawn to, but I don't have it in my head. Let's see here. Oh, there's somebody asking about Sam Alexander and Nova. It's funny how I was like, I'm not gonna do any cosmic stuff. However, Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh yeah. So Guardians of the Galaxy is even, you know, like I said, even before Annihilation, that was a group of characters I was really interested in. Partially because of what ifs. There were like what ifs about them that I always found interesting. And so once we got into the Annihilation era and we had the Abnett and Lanning versions, you know, what eventually becomes like, I guess you call it James Gunn versions now, like what we kind of have now, and Bendis was doing it. Yep. That is a book I always gravitate toward, and I always really like those characters. I did a what if with Guardians of the Galaxy that I wrote the week after the first movie came out. Like I literally had the job, and I was like on the deadline. I'm like, well, I'm gonna go write it. So when he reads that, those are the voices in my head. Like at that point, I was like, okay, this is it. But yeah, the reason why I bring that up is because it's like, I guess that part of the cosmic stuff, I guess I am interested in, or it comes to Guardians of the Galaxy, Nova, Silver Surfer. But this would be the challenge for me, right? And knowing myself is, for me as a writer, the first trick would be to go back and reread Annihilation, read both of it, read War Kings, like everything, right? Read it all, and then go, okay, now I'm not doing any of that. Right. Like,
now you've got you know exactly what happens in that, so you can push that out of your mind so you don't end up like kind of paralleling it or doing any of that.
There's David Glover has this awesome comedy special. It's called Weirdo, and it is hilarious. It's really, really funny. There's a part in it where he talks about how he did like a 30-minute, I forget, because I think the Weirdo special was for HBO, maybe it might be for Comedy Central, but he did like a 30-minute version of it earlier. And so I'm getting this wrong. I'll say it was HBO. So HBO was like, we really want you to do, I have a Showtime. They're like, we want you to do a hour long, basically. So he went up on stage, did a 30-minute set, after he comes down, HBO is like, we love you. We want you to do an hour for HBO. And he's like, great. And they're like, but you can't do any of that shit you just did.
Right.
That was too much. You can't do any of that. You got to do something totally different. That was too much. You went over the top on that one. And the way he tells that story is so funny. And that's how I feel sometimes about this stuff, where I'm like, there's a part of me that is like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to read all the best stuff. And then basically like go, but I can't do any of that. And like snap my hand away from it.
Yeah.
You know, every time I reach for a nihilist, be like, no. Like,
yep.
Sort of the, oh, cool. The next question literally is like, I think I would crush it on Guardians of the Galaxy or a Man-Thing book.
Hey, there we go.
You know who really wants to do Man-Thing is Steve Orlando. I think he did.
Really? I think he did. Yeah. He had to have, right?
New Warriors is one. So I'm going to talk about New Warriors for a moment. Yeah, Deadpool Exiles would be really fun. I think Exiles is tough because the multiverse stuff I think is so.
Well, you've been up to your neck in it for so long.
Deadpool, I love, but I love how this comment is about New Warriors. So when I was in middle school, I created a New Warriors game. Like, I basically was like, I want to make a New Warriors video game, and I wrote all these notes out about what the levels would be and how it basically, because when you go back and you look at like the Maximum Carnage video game, how it essentially was the comic and it kind of followed the story loosely, you know?
Yep.
I was like, you do a game that's basically that, but you do from issues, I think I had it from like issues 1 to 25.
Okay.
And so I literally broke it down. So yes, New Warriors is something that's on my mind. Would I ever do New Warriors? I don't know.
It's tough.
I was talking about this with Rosenberg a couple weeks ago because Hasbro announced they were doing a Justice toy.
Oh.
And I was like, I think I'm gonna get that. And they also, I was like, you know what? They should do what they should have done was they should have done a 6-pack.
Yeah.
Just had all the New Warriors in it. Like I would buy that. That's something. That's how you get me.
I think you can approximate them because I mean, Firestar is a figure. You can put her on there. I think there's.
I have a Firestar toy right over here. So.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean that's a interesting grouping, but you know, again, yeah, like it's funny we're talking a lot of team books.
Yeah.
And teams are the hardest thing. Oh, right here, this person was like Silver Surfer. Yeah.
There we go.
Team books are tough, dude. They're so hard, and I feel like I'm definitely out of the team book. But so here's the trick about team books. Every book is technically a team book.
Right.
Every book is, because you have supporting characters.
Exactly.
You have people that come in and out. You have villains. Every book has a big cast. Here's the real challenge with team books, particularly like Justice League, is that not only do you have a team book, you have characters who have their own books, and in some instances, multiple books.
Yes.
You know?
See, that's funny. I thought you were going to go more intimate with it. I thought you were going to say that the fight scenes are the toughest, because I'm imagining...
fight scenes are hard.
Right, like where you're like, okay, so Flash is going to run over and punch him, and Batman will throw a batarang, and like, you know what I mean? Like,
we get that. Yeah, all that stuff. I make a list. So, dude, like, I make a list when I'm doing these books of who the characters are in each issue. I literally mark down like what they're doing, just to be like, you got to keep track of everybody. Yeah. When I was doing Justice League versus Suicide Squad, that book was a beast because there's one page that has like, I think it's 3 different teams on the page.
Yeah.
And I mean, doing Dark Crisis was really hard because, you know, most of those pages have like 50 characters on them, and you're like, everybody has to be doing something.
Yep.
You can't just, you know,
they can't be looking.
Yeah, they can't just be standing there. One of the better things, if you can, man, let me tell you, if you work with an artist who knows DC, it is a blessing.
Sure.
Because they can fill in the blanks in some way. So like Daniel knew DC really well, but he knew the events really well. So for him, it was like, he knew what the books needed to be. And then you get to like Jamal. Jamal knows DC, he knows Superman, he knows like the mythology, he gets it. So it makes your life so much easier.
Sure.
Let me see here. This person said, I love me some 90s X-Men, Spider-Man, Iron Man. Me too.
Yep.
Josh should write Iron Man, Captain America, or Fantastic Four. But my favorite would be Moon Knight. That's interesting. Oh. Moon Knight is not necessarily a blind spot because I've actually read a lot of it.
It's easy.
Yeah, there isn't a lot. There isn't a lot. So I've done some rereads on Moon Knight. Moon Knight would be interesting. It's funny. Yeah, Iron Man, I have a lot of thoughts on. Fantastic Four. Captain America is again, like I think that what Brubaker did, which also, by the way, whenever you think that Brubaker's run started 20 years ago, your brain will melt.
Yeah, it's like, well, they just changed, but they just changed the industry. Oh no!
You're like, oh no, we're old now.
Yeah.
Technically, it's next year. It's next year. But when you start putting together that Jason Todd and Bucky have been back for 20 years.
Oh, we were having this conversation on the show where I was like, Damian will be 20.
Dude, I saw that. I saw you guys talking about this.
You know, it's just, I know. Yes, and I know you wrote the Damian series.
I wrote a lot of Damian. And the point you make about Damian being, the point you make about Damian being in the movie, it's over.
He's going to be the only Robin.
Like, he's the only Robin. Yeah, once he's in the movie, like, if that movie lands and it's good and people are like, we love the son of Batman, his name is Damian Wayne, and that's who Robin is.
Yeah, so long.
Dude, I remember I told this story.
Especially him, but yeah.
Yeah, I told this story to somebody recently where when I was working at the comic book store, there was this guy that would come in. And he would come in every month, almost every week, but every month. And he would only buy Green Lantern merchandise. So he's like, oh, there's a new Green Lantern wallet? Boop. Like, he would buy, because the comic shop I worked at in that time period, we had a lot of, like, the stuff. It wasn't just comics. We had a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
He would come in. That's where I got this power battery from, actually.
That's
same
awesome.
So he came in, and he was like, I'm going to buy... He bought, there's a Green Lantern shirt? Mine. Green Lantern jersey? Mine. You know, he was always into Green Lantern stuff.
Okay.
So what I asked him was like, you read the comics? And he was like, no, I've never read a comic before in my life.
Oh my god.
And I was like, all right, let's do this. You're here all the time. Let's do this. You know? Yeah. And so I took him over. I showed him the Green Lantern section. I started flipping through it. First thing he's like, what are the numbers about? And I was like, oh, that's the order you read them in. This is the order they came out in, which also was like, oh, when you start getting to like how confusing stuff is, you're like, oh yeah, comics can be confusing. Mm-hmm. Even though television shows have numbers and stuff, but I think there's just something, you know.
Books have chapters,
yeah, there's chapters, and it gets weird when you have volumes. Once you start getting volumes in, you're just like, oh man,
yeah.
It gets tough. And so I was like, oh well, that's the order you read them in. And so I'm showing him Green Lantern, and he's going through, and then I remember he stops, looks at me, and he just goes, so why is he white? And I was like, oh, let's hold Jordan. And he was like, Green Lantern, John Stewart. And I was like, oh, your fan comes from the cartoon. Okay, I was all right. Let's go around.
Now we can pivot. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, let's go get Mosaic. Let's get some stuff over here. We got some stuff. But in that moment, it makes you recognize that, like, sometimes those things, once they're in the cartoons, all that stuff. I mean, I definitely have had conversations with people about this where they come in with continuity stuff.
Yeah.
And you start realizing when they start talking about some of the continuity. This happened a lot at the comic book store I worked at in high school, where people would come to me with like X-Men continuity. But like I said, I don't. X-Men's always like kind of a weird one for me in terms of if I'd ever want to write the X-Men. But I read the X-Men pretty religiously for like a very long time.
Yeah,
I would say from at least like the late '80s up until I don't even know, like the late 2000s. And then I stopped, and then I intermittent picked things up, and then I read Hawks Pox. But
yes.
People would come in and they'd be like, they would start talking about X-Men continuity, and I'm like, oh, you're talking about the cartoon.
Right. You're only to refer. Yeah. Like, Wolverine was not at the Phoenix Saga. Like,
oh, dude, yeah. Let me tell you, the Phoenix Saga is always one of the more fascinating things. I remember people would come into the comic store and they'd be like, I hate these X-Men movies. They should have just done the Phoenix Saga. And I'm like, what? Like
dude,
how do you start with the Phoenix Saga? That's a lot to get to that. But anyway, let me see here. Fantastic Four. Yeah, I think about the Fantastic Four a lot. It's one of my, but the same thing though, it's the same challenge I would have is I would go back and I would read, I'd go read Stan and Jack again, but then I would read Wade and Ringo, and then I would be like, okay, I'll do any of that shit now.
No, you can't. Yeah, exactly.
Don't touch that. I have all kinds of thoughts on that stuff, but also the funny thing is that you also have to sort of, as a writer, go, my idea is genius, and then realize it was done 10 years ago. Like that's something you have to touch on.
Yeah, you've had that conversation with a couple of creators before, where they're like, "Oh my god, I got this great idea," and it's like you're like, "That happened like literally 15 years ago."
That happened to you and I were having breakfast, but it was something I was aware of, but you had like recently read, and it wasn't necessarily. It was like you know what I'm talking about. It was
I do. Yeah, it was
complicated.
It's not exactly. No.
But you knew because you had recently reread it, so it was like really prime.
I was like, wait.
Yeah. Let's see here. Somebody mentioned the Hulk. You know, I think after Al, it's tough, and then you see what Donnie did, and then now you have like what Philip is doing. I feel like Hulk, way back in the day, Hulk was the one for me. Like Hulk was the book I wanted to write. But again, that's a good example of like, am I the person for it?
Yeah.
It's like kind of what I would do, but what I would do has been done. So you have to like find a way to get out of that headspace. Yeah, Exiles was always really. That's a book I can't believe went on for as long as it did, and I bought it every month.
I know.
Like these books went over 100 issues.
I know. I couldn't believe it. No, my friend had like all the volumes, and I was like, it was a roommate of mine. He had a whole bunch of Exile. I'm like, all right, what is this? I started picking it up and reading it. I'm like, oh, it's Quantum Leap.
Yeah,
meets
Sliders, man, Sliders.
Like, okay, well, it's Sliders, but with the like omniscient, omnipotent, like invisible hand guiding them kind of thing.
Right, yeah. Like you don't know where they're. Yeah, there's like
someone's pushing them somewhere. Like there's the invisible bartender or whatever. It's been a while.
Somebody said interesting Ghost Rider. Yeah, Ghost Riders. I was actually rereading Jason Aaron's Ghost Rider the other day, and it's like, this is really good. Why do they want to give you? Somebody said here they want to get a Tempest Fugonaut figure for you.
I think Tempest Fugonaut's a hilariously stupid character, and
he's dead.
I know. You broke my heart with that, but like, we talked about.
Philip did. I think Philip did it.
Yeah,
he
did.
Philip killed him.
Yeah, it was in like a backup of an Action Comics annual or something like that. Like he dies.
He
off
dies
panel.
They're torturing him and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, there's a race of Fugonauts. It could be, and they're like, no, it's Tempest. It's that one. And I'm like, oh, because here's the thing. Okay, so Tempest Fugonaut is, you know what the problem is with Tempest Fugonaut? He insists upon himself. He's this character that shows up out of nowhere. He unapologetically is the Watcher, and and it's just, and then the Tales from the Dark Multiverse come in, and it's not enough. Like I have a problem with Tales from the Dark Multiverse only in as much as I'm like, well, so you're the conceit is that it ends with a bad ending, so like how it ends before you finish reading it.
Yeah, but that's the DNA of what Scott established. So the funny thing with the Dark Multiverse is people think it's like a dark. Oh man,
I know.
Scott talked about this, so I'm not talking out of turn really. But
yeah.
Scott's basically like the Dark Multiverse is the land of bad ideas.
Right.
Like that's realistically what it is. It's the bad ideas that didn't set, and so they go there to die. That's the whole thing. And so it's like those all have to kind of. I guess it's weird. You're right. Like just because it's a bad idea doesn't mean it has to end badly.
Yeah, but like I know it does, and I know because it's in the Dark Multiverse. Because otherwise, why is the Crime Syndicate in the main multiverse, but like Eradicator Lois Lane is in the Dark Multiverse? Like it's. But in any fact, the point about Tempest Fugonaut is it's not enough that Tempest Fugonaut is this like silly character that shows up and he's overly complicated and he just looks like a mess and he's so self-important and he's got all these, it's like a hat on a hat, he's already complicated, but then he has like one arm and he's got this control rod and I'm like, it's a lot of ideas all at once. But the conceit of the Tales from the Dark Multiverse is almost that there's a narrative where he's like, I'm going through the Dark Multiverse and seeing if I can make champions out of these places.
Yeah, he can grab people from them,
so that he can fight the Dark Crisis. Now, here's the thing that kills me about this is because we knew each other back when you were working on Dark Crisis, is that I was really hoping that there was going to be a moment because
he would show up.
that he and his cadre of characters were going to show up. And I was like, please, just, I don't know if you remember this, but I was like, please do just one moment where like, just a full page splash where Tempest Fugonaut shows up with like Eradicator Lois and half dead, half zombie Sinestro Corps, Sinestro and like Azrael Batman or no, it was like Nano Batman. Just a bunch of characters from the Tales.
Yeah,
and he's like, I've got my champions,
and then the whole costume and stuff.
And then he just gets freaking annihilated.
He gets killed. He got killed before Dark Crisis.
I know, but he already died before Dark Crisis. So, but you could have you could have given him a Black Lantern rig or something.
I could have given him a moment. You're right. Listen. Dark Crisis. I have thoughts on how I would do it differently now, but that.
I wouldn't.
Like, no, but it was like, man, if I had 12 issues instead of 7, I mean, that's really what I've looked back at now and recognized was the biggest challenge that I had.
Totally.
Somebody here said they spoke to me last year. And they would love me to do an Inhumans book. He said that I still think that Jenkins and Lee is the best Inhumans book, and I still feel that way.
I think everybody feels that way.
Yeah, I think it was. I think Black Bolt that Saladin did with Christian is really
That was
good.
good.
I like how
And
somebody was again. They're like Richard Rider Nova. Yes.
yeah.
Shang-Chi or Daredevil, Fantastic Four, maybe even a new Defenders book. Defenders is always tough. They always feel like they're not even. I'm going to offend somebody. I know I'm going to offend somebody, but the Defenders is such an interesting concept to me because, you know, it always felt like the other team.
Yeah.
And they're not even West Coast Avengers. There's just this weird.
Yeah.
I remember when it was Secret Defenders, and I actually liked that because it was like, oh, it's a secret. Now I get it, you know? And Doctor Strange and stuff, but it's just.
There was a period where the Defenders were a secret. Like, they were like, don't tell anybody about us. Like, there's the Avengers Defenders war ends with Doctor Strange making everyone forget that they're Defenders. Yeah. So it's like, but I'm like, but to what end? Like, who gives a crap if Doctor Strange is moonlighting with the Silver Surfer? Like, nobody cares.
Well, that's why it's weird too. Yeah, it's like, but then why aren't you just all Avengers and you're like Avengers Dark or something, I guess, or Avengers Black Ops team? You know, it's funny because if you go back and you look at Stormwatch, when Warren Ellis took over Stormwatch, and he basically broke the team up into 3 groups. Yeah. And I really believe that it's funny. People talk about Authority being like really influential on comics post Authority.
Yeah.
It all starts with Stormwatch, and you can see it in the fact that he broke the teams up into groups.
Yep.
If you go back and look at what Bendis was doing, he essentially did the same thing.
Yeah.
And clearly Bendis liked Warren Ellis a lot, and that's why he's in Powers, and you know.
Yeah.
Somebody else. So here's my question: the Defenders. Who are the Defenders to you? Like, that'd be my question. Are you talking about
like the Netflix?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what is it? Is it?
I hate the fact that for me the Netflix Defenders are just the new Avengers.
That dude.
Like, so no, like Defenders are just it's Valkyrie, it's Namor, it's Silver Surfer, it's Hulk and Doctor Strange. Like, that's for me the Defenders. Like,
yeah, me too. And I think that's the thing about. I never thought about that way. That should have just been called New Avengers. That they couldn't obviously, but that is what that group is.
Well, no, when Bendis took over, it was like that. Just call it New Avengers, man. You would have doubled your sales a lot, like immediately.
I don't know what happened with that. That's really, I never thought about that before. Wow, you really nailed that. I had never thought about all of that. That is really interesting. Heroes for Hire, I think there's a couple Heroes for Hire here. This Charles Vest SpiderMan, somebody had that. They've got it now. Yeah, that Charles Vest SpiderMan poster where he's chasing Hobgoblin is
that's so great. Yeah.
Let's see here. I think about Amazing Spider-Man probably too much.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I'm just going through this. Quicksilver. Listen, X-Factor 87 is one of my favorite comics ever. That is the issue. I feel like they were like, oh, this is who Quicksilver is, where he talks about being annoyed waiting in line and stuff.
Yeah, he's like, imagine being in an ATM. That's Peter David. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm glad people brought up Deadpool and Spider-Man 2099. Oh, that's right. Yeah, this person don't overstay the tenure. Yeah. I mean, dude, that's the thing about, we had this conversation last time. Like, the thing about Spider-Man is that anytime you approach Spider-Man with anything, it's like Dan Slott did it.
Yeah.
Dan Slott did it. Like, you have to approach it from that, where it's like, yeah, Dan Slott did it. It's such a hard, I'm trying to find the other thing you told me about. Is that Community? Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. It's tough.
Yeah, here, I'll drop it in the private chat. You can just click it there.
I don't think I can see it on here because of the
the freaking thing.
The problems we were having earlier this morning with our internets.
Right. Well, I could share it. I mean, the top one with 28 likes is Fantastic Four. It just says simply Fantastic.
That's so funny because that was your pick, and I did not expect that.
I know. I saw one again, Fear of Fire. There's one I think you're gonna like. It says War Machine. I think he could bring duality to the character that for decades has been decidedly one note.
I think that if you do, this is the thing. I think if you do War Machine, you're just doing Iron Man, and this is my thought. You know, it's funny, the thing that Hickman built with Hoxpox, I think, where I think him coming in and basically saying, this is my corner, don't touch it.
Right.
Like, this is my corner, don't touch it, needs to happen more often. Like, I do think there should be a creator for each group that is like, this is mine. So if you're writing Batman, this is mine. You know, if you're writing Superman, this is mine. And I think we need to have more of that. And it's the same way, and we don't really have that. And I think Marvel, I don't know, because it's funny. I have like not spoken to anybody at Marvel in a long time, and I barely know those creators. Like, I know them in passing, you know, like I know them in passing, and like, Jerry's been doing Iron Man lately, and I really I only read the first couple issues. I really liked it. I gotta catch up on it, but it's like I don't have that many connections with the people over there, so I actually don't kind of know how it is.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if Jed McKay is like Avengers is mine, right? I don't know. And it's the same way with Spider-Man. I don't know if Zeb Wells is like, this is my, I think it is. And you work with your editor, he's probably working with the editors and, but I do think we need more of that. And so there's the reason why I say this is that if I were to ever come in and do something like you're saying, War Machine, it's like, well, then
that's just Iron Man. Like
you just say all of it.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the fact that he was doing 2 books that were parallel to each other, I always love that kind of math. And that's even what we're doing with G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Where it's like you have Duke and you have Cobra Commander, and their parallel stories are happening at the same time, and they have interconnected stuff, but you can read them independently. I don't think you could read Hoxpox independently. Like I don't think you can just say I'm reading one. You have to read both, right?
You have to read both. No, they complement each other. You need them both. That's why actually it's funny, not to self promote, but we did when we did our episode of Back Issues, my wife was like, I love Hickman. I'm jumping into X-Men for the first time. Like I'm gonna read X-Men month to month. Now she's an X-Men fan. Like she reads it all. And she's been reading it since Hox and Pox. And so when we read Hox and Pox, I was like, man, I can't stand this future shit. And she was like, really? Pox, I think, is amazing. So we did.
There's some really, dude, the future stuff, there is some, especially once you get into the actual book, when he was writing the actual book, there is some really amazing emotional storytelling in that is just like heart-wrenching stuff in there. But anyway,
but when we did it, I was like, well, let's host the show together, and we'll do 2 hosts that are one, the 2 series that are one. So like I did the Hox part and she did the Pox part. So like when like Hox would wrap up, she'd take over, and I was like, this is kismet. What a genius way to approach the show. Not to pat myself on the back, but like it allowed us to
pat yourself on the back all you want.
it allowed us to intertwine like those 2 books, and yeah, it was tough. You cannot read those independent. Like you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to read Pox and that's it. Like you need to know what they're talking about over here.
I have that hardcover, and I really, I fell off because there were so many books. I mean, I was reading all of it in the beginning. I was reading all of it in the beginning. Yeah. And I fell off it, and I read Inferno, and then I really liked Inferno.
Oh yeah,
like I really liked Inferno. Well, you don't like Inferno? Oh, we gotta talk about
this. Let's just say, like, let's not say anything about it. Let's just say,
okay, all right. I liked Inferno.
I'm glad you liked it. It looks good.
A lot of Spider-Man. Thunderbolts, dude. I love Thunderbolts. I feel like it's one of the best surprises ever in comics. I stuck with that book. I actually started rereading it recently, but it's funny. Like Thunderbolts and New Mutants are very similar. I mean, obviously it's vaguely, but it's. You have a very similar creative teams, a very similar vibe to it.
I will say there's a great. This may explain the Fantastic Four thing. Somebody says this: Wolverine and Fantastic Four because he has a talent for families. I think it's because of your Flash writing. Like I think people are like, oh, he handles a family really well, and it's like Fantastic Four. You could because I mean, if you're writing Flash, you're not writing about Barry. You're writing about Barry, Wally, Max, Jay.
Dude, so I recently wrote something about the Flash. I can't say what it was for, but I recently wrote something about the Flash, and I had to like write 1,000 words in the Flash, and I kept pushing it back, and it got to a point where they called me and like, we need this, like we need it this week.
Yesterday,
and I was like, okay. So I was sitting there, I was trying to figure out how do I write something about the Flash that is true to myself, that is that I am telling something about myself, right? Which I always think that writing is a form of therapy. So it's like, what are you actually trying to say? What I want to say here?
Totally.
And I wrote basically that, where I was like, the Flash is always about the family. And the hardest thing about that book when I came onto it was that family didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so I spent 100 issues getting those characters back. That was it. It was a constant fight.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, and they gave me the first piece. They were like, here's Wally, but then I wasn't allowed to use Wally for almost a year.
Yeah.
So it was like, I mean, like it was tough at times, but I got to have Wally for a few snippets. But then once you get around to like, from like issue 39 to 50, he was a supporting character in the book. And I feel like it's one of the better time periods of that book, was because I was able to do more. But Wallace was kind of off limits because he was in Titans, or Teen Titans, excuse me. And then Wally was in Titans. And so But a lot of those pieces were gone, the family pieces, especially not, 5 years getting all those pieces back. And so by the time you get to the end, it's like basically everybody's here. Wally obviously was doing, but that's why I always say like technically the last issue of my Flash run isn't 101. It's Speed Metal.
Right.
Because it has that ending where they're all, for the most part, they're all together. And then Wally, basically Barry is like, it's your turn to run. And then Wally runs ahead. He's like, damn right. And that was the beginning of Wally being the Flash again.
Yes.
Because that was the whole thing for me. It was like those two things. It was like Wally becomes the Flash again by the ending, and the family is back. And that's what was like my constant struggle across that book. But what I realized in that time period was that not only was I giving the Flash back his family, I was building a family. Like I had gotten in the time period of me on that book, like I got married, I bought a house, and I had 2 kids. So it's like really was building a family. There's a picture of me holding my daughter the day she's born, and I'm wearing a Flash shirt. And I feel like it was just this connective thing between those two things. But I think about this a lot, about DC is comprised of these families, and Marvel for a long time, you could kind of argue wasn't. I mean, X-Men is a family. I think that's a family, but it was like Fantastic Four was the family. I think that's changed now. Yeah. In some ways, because of the characters that have been added, the sidekicks, the children.
Yep. Legacies. Well, and Avengers being just a household brand. Now the Avengers are like, we're a family too. And they were. It's funny, you go back and you look at like the older stuff, like they are like, we're a family, but it's like more like a corporate family that tells you they're a family, but only to get you to work harder, like
That's really funny. Somebody they said Fantastic Four Hulk, but please say it DC. Just be on the lookout for that Bloodlines too. No,
I know. Bloodlines too. That's when you know that's gonna be the end of it.
That's it right there. Ghost Rider or Blade. Blade would be a blast to write. Yeah. What's funny is that like, so if you go back to like the early 2000s when I was trying to break in, I was pitched for all kinds of stuff, and I didn't pitch for Blade. I pitched for Union Jack.
That may have been
stuff with vampires
for you. Okay.
What's that?
I said that might have been tougher for you to sell.
No, it was never gonna happen. But I was, there was like a Van Rab, like John Cassaday 3-part Union Jack series that is amazing. It's really it's just a good comic book. Of course, John Cassaday draws it. Like it is a good 3 issues of a comic book.
Yeah.
But there's vampires, and it's funny because I was like, oh man, there's a whole vampire thing going on at Marvel. We should do something about that. And then that became like a whole thing for a window where it was like it was happening in the alternate universe and happening in the Avengers at the same time. Or the X-Men too. It was like suddenly there were vampires everywhere, and I was like, I kind of had this 10 years ago, but not really.
And now there is one. Now we're getting another one. It's
I know, I saw that. What was it? Was it Blood Hunt?
It's called Blood Hunt. Yeah, I think it's Blood Hunt. Yeah. It's got blood in the name. It's almost Bloodlines, but yeah.
Captain America, Guardians of the Galaxy, Venom.
I saw Venom in there. I was like,
Venom is interesting. Is interesting. I feel like after Donnie and after Al, I don't even know where I would begin.
No.
Like, yeah, that's an interesting one. I appreciate somebody saying they thought I would do a good job on the Hulk, and there's a lot of Spider-Man love in here, which Hawkeye's interesting. Hawkeye's the same thing, where it's a character. So Hawkeye's interesting to me. How would I put this? This might upset somebody. I really like Hawkeye, and I like him in the Avengers. And I remember being super bummed when he died.
Yeah.
During Avengers Assembled. I like Fraction stuff.
Yep.
I like Rosenberg's. I don't think it's a character I'd ever want to write.
No, I don't blame you.
And I write Green Arrow, so I feel like I've already kind of hit the
right, but it's like, but that's actually better. I think that's better because it shows that you do different. It wouldn't just be Purple Arrow. It would be like they're very different people. Although I think Kurt Busiek would disagree, given how they're portrayed in Avengers JLA, which is a fantastic little like bit of business throughout, where they're just like, I'm a better archer than you. And they're like, no. And like, they just keep, they keep like trying to outdoing each other. And I'm like, that's great. And then of course there's a great moment. This is just talking about other books, but like, there's that moment where like the worlds get merged and they're like, or not merged, but like, I guess it's the implication by like issue 3 is that like only Superman and Cap remember, but they're like, I guess the barrier between the universes is so weak that like the new continuity is that they constantly cross over. And so they're like, oh no, Clint moved to the DC universe, and now he's with Dinah.
Oh my god. You do you follow Tom Brevoort's like newsletter?
I should. I read it periodically when I remember it's there because it's a font of information. It is
Yes,
just
I
like,
read it every Sunday because he posts
I
it on
have to.
Sunday. You should
Yeah.
read it. I think in the last one, he talked about JLA Avengers, and he talked about issue 3
Oh my
and
God.
how they had a really tight outline, and then issue 3 was when it fell apart. Like I fell apart by the harsh word. There basically was like that was when there was a argument about what they were doing, or they ran out of room.
Yeah.
And I think once they ran out of room, there was some kind of problem, and then that led to other problems. I think if you read it, he goes into it. And,
There's a
he says, I actually need to read this. I have the it's actually behind
the
me.
hardcover.
Yeah, I have it.
Oh.
And I need to. He says in the newsletter that they actually talk about it openly inside the second part of the hardcover, where it's the scripts.
Oh, cool.
So I
the hardcover the hardcover that's out of print that's like thousands of dollars. The one that you can't.
Yeah, I have it somewhere behind me.
Yeah.
Where is that thing? I have it because it's all white. Where is that?
Yeah, it's all white. It's gorgeous. I should have bought it. I can't believe it's.
Yeah, it's right here. Yeah, this guy.
Yeah.
This one is.
By the way, for the record, that's a DC book. DC could publish it anytime they want.
No comment.
Like up until about 2 years ago, it was up for sale on DC's official website.
What?
It was marked as sold out, but you could buy it for $75.
Well, you can't buy it if it's sold out.
No, but it was there.
Yeah.
Like it was listed for 75.
Listed. Yeah,
it's
then somebody woke up and was like, "Wait, what?"
Oh, wait a minute. Well, you know what happened? Probably somebody went, order, and they were like, "Oh, I gotta print that." No, we're not doing.
Oh yeah, they got an order, and they're like, "Wait, what's going on?"
What? I can't print that.
I love how somebody put Rom the Space Knight.
I saw that. I was like, "Yeah,
dude, Rom is a blind spot for me."
Yeah, same. I have no idea.
I mean, there's stuff. What's that?
I have no idea what even is a Space Knight. I just honestly, for me, I remember when Bendis kept putting Space Knights in there. He's just teasing Rom, and I'm like, this is lost on me, my friend. Is this like an action figure? What's happening? And then I looked up the Rom toy, and I'm like, how could anyone care?
Dude, it's so funny. I know people who really, really love that.
They're
character.
crazy for Rom, and I'm like, good for you, man.
Yeah, I it's. I mean, I read a lot of comic books. I did
not read Rom.
Yeah, Rom was one I missed, and it's kind of like how Valiant, like the original Valiant stuff, I never read.
I tried.
I was an Image. If I was outside of Marvel and DC, it was Image, and then later I started reading Dark Horse Legends stuff, like reading mostly Hellboy. But I think I read Ghosts and I read a little bit of Axe. Later on, I read that for work.
Oh yeah, well, anything the Wizard told me to read, I was like, well, I'll pick up Lady Rawhide. Yeah,
dude, I miss Lady Rawhide. That's really fun. That book was super popular though in that moment.
Dude, just not to toot anyone's horn, but Murphy got Adam Hughes to come back and draw a new Lady Rawhide cover. I was like, that's smart. Good for you.
Yeah, no, it was good.
But yeah, X Ghost, all that stuff.
I miss Wizard.
Me too, man.
Yeah,
I talk about this all the time. I feel like I think there's an opening. I feel like there's not necessarily a magazine, but something.
I have thoughts on it, and there are people I know who worked on Wizard, and they obviously have a lot of thoughts on it too.
Oh, I'm sure they're like, never again.
Curious, like, where are the rights at now?
That's a thing where I actually friended Gabe Shamus on LinkedIn just so I could pitch in the idea of just reprint Wizards as hardcover volumes.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Right? Just reprint Wizard cover to cover as a hardcover series, like they did kind of like what they did with Twisted Toy Fair Theater, where they reprinted all the Twisted Toy Fairs.
Yes, dude.
But just Wizards, like with the ads, with everything, all
just you. Oh man, I bet you that's some logistical nightmare, like legally. But just to reprint it as like omnibuses, like this is. Man, how would you do that? Would you do? I guess you'd have to do it like yearly. But do you think you get 18 volumes? I mean, listen, I would buy it, but
I would buy it in a heartbeat. Are you kidding me?
The whole thing. I think what I would kind of wish they would do, because this stuff is available to find online if you knew where to look.
Oh yeah.
The thing that I would want to do is take it and just release it online. Just make it available that I can get online and I can read it. Like,
I'll send you a link.
No, listen. I know. So what I'm saying to you is, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I feel like I think there is something to it, and I wish they would try to fix them out. But I don't know. I imagine it's some kind of legal
Well,
nightmare.
even just the fact that, like, I remember in a Wizard 50, they did, like, a retrospective on all the covers, and there was, like, one issue that they were like, "We can't even show the cover right now," because they didn't get approval. It was, like I think it was, like, a Bloodline no, not oh my god, Bloodline's in the vein. I think it was a Valiant and Marvel character, like, at the same time, and they were like and someone at Marvel was like, what the hell are you doing?" Like, it was I don't remember what the cover was, but it's,
Yeah, I
there's one that
imagine
was
there's
they couldn't
probably
even do it back then. They can't do it now. I mean,
no, I imagine there's some stuff, but you never know. People can make deals to
did you
make money,
hear
you
that
know?
apparently the first image cover, that amazing Todd McFarlane image of Spider-Man in the wizard robes, that
Yeah.
was originally just a birthday gift
No,
to
I knew that.
them,
Yeah,
and that they just
yeah.
used it as the cover. I was like, what? And Todd just being like, well, okay.
Dude, I've seen other books do that without naming names. I've seen other books
No,
do
where
that.
they like use art that was given to them, and they're like,
There
that's
was
a
a
cover now.
commission or something, and they're like, "Hey, I'm using that now." Yes. Yeah. I know that some publishers you're not allowed to do that, but I have seen it happen. I mean, I saw it happen like 20 years ago. I haven't seen
Sure.
it happen recently.
Okay.
Let's see here. Daredevil was cool. Yeah, Fantastic Four. A lot of Fantastic Four. Some
Yeah.
Hulks are good.
For me, I think it's a dead heat between. It's mostly Spider-Man and Fantastic Four. Although there's a couple
There's
like I saw
a
Dark
lot
Hawk.
of
I was
heroes for
like,
hire.
yeah,
Wait,
that's
what did
true.
you see? Sorry,
I saw one Dark Hawk. I'm like, okay.
Dude, I saw that too. Darkhawk is funny because I always love the design of Darkhawk, and I read Darkhawk, but you know who loves Darkhawk? Loves Darkhawk is Kyle Higgins.
Really? I guess that makes sense.
Massive and be like, yeah, no shit.
Wow, yeah.
He literally, I think he wrote a one shot or something. I think he wrote a one shot at one point, but yeah, dude, look at
yeah.
That dude. One thing I love about Massiverse is that you can tell Kyle was like, these are all the things I love. I genuinely love this stuff. Like he really, really loves Power Rangers. He loves Darkhawk. He loved Invincible. Like he was like, I'm taking all the things I love and I'm smashing them together into something I will also love. And you can tell. I think that's why it's successful. And this actually goes back to the thing about the fan thing, where it's like he was able to be a fan of these things and somehow make it his own,
right? And
has success with it. And all of it comes from such a place of love, and you can see that. You can see how much it all comes from this this place of love, and I think that's something where it comes to like the whole I don't know, Dan and I never talked about it in depth because I was always conflicted on it, and I know this is a thing that like almost everybody falls into at one point is you have that thing that you love and you want to reference it and you recognize that nobody else cares about it, or you want to reference it. I mean, I don't know, it's complicated. I think there's a lot of like it's just complicated. I'm trying to find it. Let's see if there's anything else in here that's like I think you're right. FF is the one. That's really fast. Heroes for Hire is in here.
Yeah, Heroes for Hire, Spider-Man. I saw more than a couple of Daredevils, but it's mostly them. I saw one Doctor Doom, which I really liked. I was like, oh, a Doctor Doom series. Yeah.
I was just talking about Doctor Doom this morning for reasons I will not say.
Oh.
They're unrelated. I can say what it is. I mean, listen. I will tell you this. The moment we get Doctor Doom on the screen, that's all I want.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're going to get it sooner than we were going to, which is also a crime.
Who knows? I mean, we don't know. Dude, every movie I have been like, listen, every movie
put him at the end.
Is Doctor Doom showing up?
Yeah,
dude, I don't care what happens next. I'm there. I'm there.
Right, I'm in. But put Doctor Doom at the end of your definite movie. Well, should we? I don't know how much you really should or want to talk about, but they just dropped like a whole bunch of news today about like the MCU and how like
read it all, and we're not going to talk about it.
All right. Well, all I'll say is like
my favorite.
Yeah,
it's funny. Like Doctor Doom and Lex Luthor are my two favorite villains in comics.
Yeah,
and you can see it with Lex Luthor. I think you can see how much I'm protective of Lex Luthor, and I put Lex Luthor and stuff.
Right.
You know,
and they've never had a good cinematic portrayal. Gene Hackman is not doing Lex Luthor. Gene Hackman is not doing Lex Luthor. I don't know what he's doing. I don't begrudge it.
Here's what I will say to you about the Gene Hackman thing, and I will sell somebody else with this one. if you go and you read Robert Venditti's Superman 78,
Yes.
he has Lex Luthor in it, and it is Gene Hackman being Lex Luthor, but it's like Venditti making him Lex Luthor, like even more so.
Okay.
So he has like the Gene Hackman voice. He nails it. Like, dude, Robert's voice for all those characters is so great, but he nails those movie voices particularly. Right. Like they all just are really good. So you should check that out if you haven't already read it.
I read the first couple of issues of the first run.
The first one, yeah. The second one hasn't started yet, or it's about to start.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would read that. But you know, I like Gene Hackman's Lex, but I like it. I see what you're saying.
I like it better than the next one.
Interesting. It was totally different.
It was.
It was this tragic Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's interesting how some people see Lex as just this like maniacal villain, and then some people see him as like, a tragic figure. And I guess I fall on a tragic figure. But Dr. Doom is the same way.
Yeah.
I think one of the best comics I ever read in the comic book store. Like, that moment, like you actually read a book in the store, like you get it off the shelf and you just read it right there.
Hell yeah.
And I was working at the store at the time. Is that issue where Dr. Doom is like, oh, I'm going to like forget science. I'm going to do magic. Yeah. And I'm going to go to hell. And I'm going to make a suit of armor out of my mom's flesh.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
One of the best, like, hell yeah moments. So here's what's funny. I didn't do it. But there was a plan for Lex. So originally, when I first got the job on Superman, I wasn't quite sure what to do with Lex yet. Mm-hmm. And so I had this idea of Lex being missing after Dark Crisis. It was an idea I had at one point, and you would find out that he went and learned magic because he was like, magic can kill Superman. I'm gonna go learn magic.
Yeah.
And the very first person, I think the only person I pitched this to was Mark Waid.
Oh.
And I remember talking to him on the phone and being like, I'm going to have Lex learn magic. And I explained the whole thing. And as I'm explaining, I'm like, oh, yeah, like your issue of Fantastic Four. And he was like, yes, exactly like my issue of
He's like, oh, you've caught up with me.
Supportive, yes. But he had a really interesting take on it of like, Lex wouldn't necessarily respect magic, like, because it's so uncontrollable and he's all about control. It was really interesting talking to him. But then I was like, that's when I later on started thinking about like, oh, LexCorp, and he'll give LexCorp to Superman and stuff like that. And he's in prison, and I was like, oh, he's Hannibal Lecter. Okay, I started piecing that stuff together after that. But
that's still fun. No, it's been a fun ride so far, and it's definitely like it's going in the right direction. I'm really digging it, and I think people are too. Like I think like overall the positive. I mean, it's positive voices. Nobody's like, man, I hate what's going on in Superman. It's all just like either like, should I pick up Superman, or I love what's going on in Superman? So I'm like,
yeah, great. I hope people pick it up. I mean, we have the trade coming out. I think it comes out when this video goes out. Like it's the same week. And
great.
So I hope people pick up that trade. It's the first 6 issues, and really, it's first 5 plus the annual, which is sort of like 5.5 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of the stuff we've done in the book, and I think across the whole Superman line, like we've been really trying. That's the way to put it. Like we're really putting a lot of our mind into it. I was thinking about this the other day about how like it's weird to me that Superman is only monthly because I feel like Superman is my full-time job sometimes.
Yeah.
I write Batman, Robin, and Green Arrow, and Duke, and Cobra Commander, and Duke and Cobra Commander are really, really just fun. Like there's fun things to work on. But when I work on Superman, that's the one that I probably spend the longest working on because we really want it. We just want it to be good, and we want people to like it, and it's an interesting challenge. But yeah, Dr. Doom being in the movies is the thing that like I think we're all waiting for. It's just that moment of him just like, how does he show up? When does he show up? Is he show up as Victor? Does he show up as Doom?
Right.
Which of these movies? Every single movie I have been like, just give me something.
Yeah.
Just give me
Say
something.
Latveria once.
Yeah, say Latveria. Say like just have a dude making the mask. Give me something. That's all I need.
Oh,
give me something.
Can you imagine? Because I had a pitch a long time ago, and it wasn't really a pitch because I didn't have any position. I wasn't in any position.
But in your head, yes.
In my head, I was like, you could do an entire phase of Doom. Like you could do like where it's Doom versus everybody. Like it's like, and then wrap it up with Fantastic Four, or you open it with Fantastic Four, but Doom, because you can see different like Doom versus like in a Doctor Strange 2 or 3. Back then it would have been 2. obviously
Yeah.
Triumph and Torment, where it's like Doom is a protagonist. He's the second lead, like Loki is in most of the Thor movies. With Spider-Man, he's like it would be like Spider-Man versus Thanos. It's like he's a massive powerhouse. Like, what do you do with that? But then and then it's like Doom could be your Iron Man. Like the way that they ended Endgame, where it's like just the clanging of the mask, you could dovetail that stinger where they were like, yeah, it's the end of it's poetic, it's the beginning of the MCU, it's the end of the MCU, and dovetail it right into the forging of the Doom mask. Like, he could be that big, especially about who you cast. Like, it could be that big a deal, but he's the effing villain.
Like you can spend some time developing him, and
exactly,
like you could build him up as a victor first and show the tragedy and show him get there, and then, because he is, it's funny, like he and Iron Man, him and Tony, they really have a lot in common. Like, but there's that ego to them both, and so it's like they both think they know better than everybody else. You could, like you're saying, that'd be great if they were able to build that across, but that's always the one that I'm waiting on. I'm just like, when there was one movie in particular, I can't remember which one it was now. There's been so many, but there was one that I felt like, it would make sense for him to be at the ending. Damn it,
was it Eternals?
I actually haven't seen Eternals.
Oh, okay.
I haven't seen Eternals.
I love it. I think it's great.
I've had so many people tell me I had to watch it, and I just haven't.
Yeah, no, I would never run out and go see Eternals. I was able to go see it like early. And I was like, screw it, let's go. And we had a wonderful time. I was like, this is a really
I need to see it.
Well made.
Maybe I'll try watching it this weekend. But I think it might have been this. Oh no, I know exactly what movie. Okay, no, I know exactly what movie I thought I was going to happen at the ending, and I know why they gave us the ending they gave us. But was Black Panther 2?
Oh yeah.
Because it's like, we're establishing there are other countries.
Yes.
Right? We're establishing as other countries. They kind of hint at it. I'm trying to remember this. But they kind of hint at it a little bit. Like, they're establishing, like, here's,
here's like Atlantis or whatever they called it. Because
if they had just been like, and they established some of the stuff that was going on because of Sokovia, like, if they had even just said something like, we have a problem in Latveria, my brain would have started melting in the theater.
Totally.
But if they just been like, hey, we have all these problems, and then maybe Namor or something, just have like Dr. Doom be like, I also have access to this stuff. You know what I mean? Just give me something. That was the one that I was sitting in the theater being like, this is the time to do it.
Yes.
This is
everyone's here. Everyone's here. Like, watching.
Yeah, we're all in that movie. Everyone went to see that movie. That movie is insanely sad.
Yes.
So that is the most surreal, sad, like, this person we all love really did die. And so it just takes that movie to a whole other level of sadness that it hits you hard. And so I was just like, the whole time I was watching that movie, it was like, okay, I know this is going to end with him having a kid. Like, that. This is where this is going. I know where this is going. So give me that. That's the mid. But at the very ending, just give me Dr. Doom. So that would have been the one. But that's why I was talking about Dr. Doom this morning. It was mostly just like, when's Dr. Doom going to show up?
When is it going to show up?
The math of all that stuff. Did you and I talk about this where I was like, the best Fantastic Four movie is still the Roger Corman one?
Yeah.
No, it's still the
You're totally right.
It's the
because it is. It looks like garbage. And let me tell you something. Back in the day, like when that movie came out or didn't come out, when it was made, I would have been very excited to see that movie.
That was a good, like, made for TV movie sort of thing. Like, if they put that on television, I think people would have been like, okay. I mean, listen, there was that Captain America movie, there was the Punisher movie,
dude,
I had that Generation X pilot, like, saved forever about dreams, which is
so horrible. And also
weird.
Like how it was like released in UK, everyone has like they're dropping F-bombs and like serious hardcore sex
references. Really? I never knew that.
Oh my god, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Jubilee says something really messed up, and I was like, what version do I have?
So in the comic store, before I worked at the comic store, I would go in and you'd buy your books, whatever. As I was a kid, and I would get Wizard, and so Wizard would talk about the Fantastic Four movie, and they would talk about how it's never coming out.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
At the comic store I worked at, they had a big TV behind the counter, like a huge television, and they would play superhero movies on it.
Sure, of course.
And one day I walk in there, and they're playing the Fantastic Four movie.
Oh my god!
They're just playing it.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, what?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
this is forbidden fruit. Like
Yes.
this is treasure we've uncovered.
Yeah.
And they were like, we have it. We have copies of it.
Right. We have bootlegs from the
And
Comic-Con. Yeah.
well, so I was like, can I have one? And they were like, we can't sell it to you.
Mm.
And my brain in that moment as a little kid was like, I guess that means I can't have it.
Right.
But they were like, here you go, kid. This little VHS tape. And I still have it. And it's just a black VHS tape with a white label with a little 4 with a circle around it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I still have it to this day. And I ran home and I popped it and I watched that whole movie. And I was like, this little kid version of me was like, this is dope.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what am I watching? And what's funny is there's a part at the ending where the Human Torch stops, like a bomb is coming.
Yes.
And you know this, right? That
I've seen it.
But you know it's ripped from Max Fleischer's Superman.
No.
It's like a rotoscope. You know, a rotoscope, they'll like, dude, so they traced. So if you watch the ending, there's a sequence where Human Torch saves New York City.
Yeah, and he like tumbles.
It is, yes, dude. It is frame for frame the exact same scene from Max Fleischer's Superman, where Superman saves the city from a laser.
Oh my god.
They're frame for frame, dude. It's the same.
That's
the same
amazing.
Thing.
I know exactly what episode
thing.
you're talking about.
Dude, it's the same thing. Even as a kid, I was like, what? And then I was like, I had never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I still have it.
That's sick.
It's in the garage right now. I should have it up. I should have it in my Marvel section over here. I have all
absolutely,
the
yeah.
I should put it over here as like a you know,
like a trophy.
Trophy.
Yeah. Friggin' during the pandemic, Disney should have restored it and put it out on the friggin' app. Like that was, it's an all ages Fantastic Four movie. Can you believe? Like you, who owns it? Right? You, Disney.
Listen, let me say why I don't think that's the best idea. I
you think it'll hurt the brand?
That would have been so much fun because I'm sure there's my version is probably like the 10th taped version. You know what I mean? So it's like
it's taped off of 10 different versions. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I would like to see a version that is like, oh, this is actually like the real film transferred digitally over, right? It probably wouldn't even be that hard to do necessarily. I mean, you know,
there's actually there's a documentary about it, about the making.
I know,
it's not very good, but it's still, you know.
No, but so here's the challenge with that, and this goes back to what we were talking about with the Batman and Robin thing. Is they've already had people. How to put this? Nuance is sometimes lost. Yeah, so if you put that out there, there is a fairly good chance there'll be somebody on the internet being like, "I just saw the new Fantastic Four movie,
and it's really bad." Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to be careful with that.
That's true, but they do have, they've both Ewok movies on there.
I know. Let me ask you this question. I don't know this off the top of my head, and I always forget. Is the Star Wars Christmas special on there?
Only the animated parts.
Oh,
but they did put out the animated parts, which are like, they're still pretty bad, but they're not 20 minutes of Wookiees growling at each other with no subtitles as the opening sequence. Because see, Fantastic Four, Roger Corman bootleg is the same kind of grail as the Star Wars Holiday Special for me as a kid, where it's like, like there's a period of time, ladies and gentlemen, where there wasn't 17 different Star Wars shows going on at the same time. I was like, there's more Star Wars, and someone told me I can't have it.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, I gotta see it. And they're like, no. It's real. Trust me, you don't want to see it. And
but then once they say that, you're like, but
no, I gotta see it.
You don't know me.
No, but the reality is, folks, you don't.
Well, I had a bunch of the cartoons on like droids and stuff like that.
Droids and Ewoks.
Yeah, I had those on tape and stuff. But that is why, and actually I have to go here in a second.
Yeah.
But that's why when Shadows of the Empire came out, it was like we all lost our damn minds.
Yeah.
And that's another one, dude. If that's another one, whenever I watch, I'm really behind on Star Wars shows.
Me too.
I'm like a year behind, which means I've missed a lot. The moment they mentioned Dash Rendar, I'm like, I'm here. Let's do this.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Because I think they wiped him from continuity, but then in a book, they mentioned like the planet and stuff, and I'm like, listen, I like Crumbs too. I get it,
but come on, like we need.
I want the cake. Give me a cake.
I want Shadows of the Empire should have been an animated movie in 1999. Like that should have been
Yeah, I wish that they had really. That's one that I wish they would kind of embrace. But okay, so I have to wrap up here. next time Sal and I talk, I'm gonna ask the commenters this time, because it was really fun talking about what they thought I should do at Marvel. There was nothing completely blindsided in there.
No, you said you were going to talk about some negative comments. I didn't see any, so I'm
there
happy.
Wasn't any, so great. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm curious, what do you want me and Sal to talk about? And do you have questions for me about anything we've talked about or anything going on? Let's do that. But what do you want Sal to talk about? And Sal, I noticed something. Last time, people really enjoyed Sal explaining something to me. If there is something you think Sal should explain to me, let's do it. I know a lot of stuff about comics, but I do have blind spots, and I have blind spots when it comes to certain parts of fandom. So if there's anything that you're like, that Sal loves, like, let us know. Because if you're a person that regularly watches Sal's show and there's something that Sal is really passionate about and loves, let's get Sal to talk about it.
Yeah.
So Sal can explain to me his love for certain things. I want to hear.
I would love to see that. And furthermore, I feel like, a lot of this show is also you explaining things to me where I'm like, what? That happened? Like, because that's the great thing about like nerds of our age, is that like we all ran in different circles, but we have a lot of overlap. So it's but the same level of obsessiveness, because it was pre-internet. So it's like, I have to get every single crumb of anything, and any magazine, any article, anything that like might reference the thing that I'm obsessed with, because I'm at that age where I'm obsessed with everything. I'll eat it up and then remember it forever. It's funny, but yeah, this one we got a hook already. It's like Joshua Williamson reads your comments. Like, that's the show.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. All right, we'll see how that goes. That'll be funny. But yeah, I think at some point we'll do a video talking about pitching comics. We'll do that at some point.
I love that idea.
And we can talk about that. If people are interested in that, we can literally talk about the process of pitching and how I've done a lot of pitching. And we can talk about the year that I did 10 pitches and they were all rejected.
Oh,
we can talk about that too. That'll be a fun one.
Devastating. Yeah, I'd love to.
We can talk about books. I can talk about books that I've had that I've pitched that have been rejected, that I've tried and failed. I picked you, added image, we talked about the whole thing. But we can also talk about the ones that have made it through.
Totally. Folks, thanks so much for watching. Josh, thanks so much for being here. And we'll see you guys next month. Thanks a lot for watching, buddy. So long.